Yes, Senator Paul. Thank you so much for your leadership. My question is around a lot of what you talked about, and I think what a lot of people call the swamp up in Washington, what people are really frustrated about and how can we get involved and make some changes in any way to this? I just feel like that they are, it's so much easier to send somebody else's money, like you said. And, I feel like these are our tax dollars and they should be going to us. I'm not proposing that we don't help others, by no means, but I also feel like that it's just very frustrating that when we get the short end of this and then, and we don't get to see the fruits of our labor and, working for us.
Well, I think there are a couple of rules of thumb, and I think that's a good question, Julie, about what we should do. One rule of thumb is that the more distant government gets from you, the less responsive it is, So if you think about it in your life, you probably know who your city council person is, you may know who your state rep is, and you may be actually able to call them on the phone, you may see them at church, you may see them in the grocery store. The federal officials are much more distant, and it's a little harder to have as much interaction or as much sort of feedback to them as you do for your local officials. Also, the more distant it gets, the more the dollars blur and the money gets so big that people don't pay attention to efficiency anymore. Milton Friedman put it this way. He said that nobody spends somebody else's money as wisely as their own. And that's a real truism when you think about it. When you think about if I were asking you for $1,000, you're going to think long and hard how much work it took to get that $1,000, and you'll make a very significant decision whether or not to give $1,000 to a project. But when a politician looks at it, they might see $1 million or $1 billion, more money than any of us would ever earn in a lifetime. And they see that, but it's not their money. So they don't react in the same way that you would. You'd say, I had to work a month or 2 months to get this $1,000 and save this up, or a year if you had to save $1,000. And you'd say, that's my hard sweat and tears. That's my labor. And you'd think long and hard and you'd try to make a wise decision. But when it's somebody else's money, they just spend it because they don't have the same responsibility for how it was earned. And it's even worse than that. In Washington, they're not just spending the money we have, we're spending money that we borrow from our kids and our grandkids. So last year, after the governors shut the economy down, we borrowed $4 trillion in addition to the $1 trillion we already borrowed. So last year, we borrowed somewhere between $5 and $6 trillion in 1 year. This year, we're borrowing another $2 trillion already. That's what just got passed. But we're borrowing from the future, and it is my concern that there will be ramifications, that it damages our currency, that we'll eventually get rising prices, or that people will get squeezed as prices rise faster than your wages do. So I think the main thing you should argue for is that more of your government be at a local level. You pick us. You get to pick us either in primaries or general elections. And I think it's important that participate, find out, interview the candidates, go to a forum, go to talk to them, ask them questions. Not many people do. And then if you're an activist and you actually work in a campaign, not many people do that. So being a voter is sort of the minimum, but beyond being a voter, being either a volunteer or someone who screens out who the best candidates are, working in primaries where not as many people vote, all of those things are important. And then once you elect somebody, watch how they vote. I think the newspapers and the televisions do an abysmal job. I haven't looked at a newspaper any time in the last couple of years, really, that lists a very good listing of how we vote up here. So if you wanted to know how I'm voting, it's not really listed in the newspaper. It's not online, easily findable. We need to make it easier to see how they vote. In fact, when I first got involved in politics, I started a group called Kentucky Taxpayers United. When I first moved and began my medical practice, this was something I did on the side. And the main thing we did was we looked at the state legislature and we looked at all their tax and spending votes, and we published a big brochure that had how every representative and every senator voted on 10 or 12 important tax and spend issues. And then we published it and mailed it out to folks. I think that is important. So participation, getting involved in campaigns, and then watching people like a hawk once they're elected to make sure they do as they promised. All of those things are important. But remember, the government is best that governs least. Government is best that governs most locally.
All right, we'll go ahead and go to another question now. Let's go to Mr. Eric Baker. Mr. Eric Baker, you're live with the senator. Go ahead and ask your question.
Senator Paul, my first question would be, why is the Kentucky National Guard in D.C.? What are they guarding the Capitol from? And then my second question on the money situation with our taxpayer dollars and why they're going out or across the seas. Why have we not joined in to do the Convention of States and or succeed with other states that have talked about doing so?
On the first question with the National Guard, I don't think there is a threat that is such that we should have the National Guard here. I think that we have, a 10-foot tall fence with razor wire on it, with about a mile perimeter all around the office buildings, all around the Capitol. If you want to come and see the world's greatest constitutional republic, which is America, you can't come anymore. You can't get in to see your representatives. You can't get in the Capitol. It's really a sad time. And I think basically the reason we're doing it is because Nancy Pelosi underreacted and didn't have adequate security on January 6th. And so now she's overreacting. And I think ultimately it's going to come out that there were requests for National Guard and for more Capitol Hill police before January 6th, and that those requests were turned down by Nancy Pelosi and her handpicked sergeant at arms. I think as that becomes more readily apparent, she's concerned that she'll be blamed for not having adequate security on January 6th. And as a consequence, I think she's putting up a big show of force with having the National Guard out there now. And so I do think that there are threats. Look, I was at the ball field when a crazy Bernie Sanders supporter came and shot at us. Steve Scalise almost died. One staff member was about 10 feet from me, was shot in the leg. The guy fired off 200 shots in about a 5-minute period. So I'm aware of the violence that we face and that we need security. The Capitol Hill police saved my life that day. They saved about 30 of us who would have been killed had the Capitol Hill police not been there. One night, my wife and I, after leaving the White House for a big convention where the president was speaking, couldn't even cross a road without a mob of over 100 people attacking us. That night, our lives were saved by the D.C. police. So I'm a big proponent of our police and that they are a viable function and that we shouldn't buy into this craziness of defund the police. But at the same time, we live in a free country. We don't want to live under an army. The army has a great purpose, but the army is for defending us from foreign invasion. And when we have to have the army used, the Constitution was very clear that we vote on declaring war on a specific enemy. When 9/11 happened, I was as mad as any other American about the people who attacked us, and I would have voted for the authority to go after them. We did. We found them, we captured them, we killed them, and we put them in prison. That happened over probably 15 years ago now, and yet we're still in Afghanistan building them roads and schools and bridges, and it has nothing to do with our national defense. So I think you hit the nail on the head. With foreign intervention, our founding fathers didn't want us to be at war overseas or anywhere else unless Congress had declared the war. I recently spoke to a group of National Guardsmen from Kentucky who are up here guarding the Capitol, and I told them that it's inexcusable that their representatives have not voted on whether or not we should be at war in Afghanistan or Somalia or Mali or Niger or any of these places where we send these young kids. It is unfair, irresponsible, and it is Congress shirking their duty to have sent these kids who sometimes come out back, losing a leg, losing both legs and an arm, and no one has bothered to even vote whether we should be there and declared who the enemy is. Look, there's 7 different clans, maybe 15 different clans that have been fighting each other in Somalia for 100 years. I don't know how we're supposed to pick who the best is and whether or not your son or your daughter should go fight in Somalia. So some clan wins that probably doesn't like us anyway. If they get in power, their true stripes will come out that they don't care much for us either. We've got no business in most of those battles. And our founding fathers said we shouldn't be there unless it's declared by Congress. I continue to fight for that, and I'll continue to fight that we only go to war when a war is declared and when Congress votes on it, and it's always the last resort, not the first resort.